I bought the cheapest 4K TV on Amazon. This is the Roku UD1, available in sizes from 43 inches up to 55 inches, and the prices start as low as $200. This is a 4K 60Hz display with full smart TV capabilities, HDR, Dolby Atmos for superior surround sound, and also loads of connectivity with multiple HDMI ports. For the price, this TV seems like great value, but is it actually worth the money? Right, so this is the TV that I've picked up right here. It's a Roku television that I found on Amazon that I think, top of my head, it was around 250, 300 pounds. It's available in a bunch of different sizes. Depending on the size you choose, it can go low as around 150 all the way up to $300 for the much larger ones. This is a 55 inch, which I think sort of like the perfect balance for about 95% of people. It's big enough for the room that you're gonna put it in, but it isn't like too small where it feels like a bit of a computer monitor. So this is a 4K TV. And I'm pretty excited to see how it performs. It's quite thick.
That's what she said.
Right, so that's the feet placed onto the TV, no stresses at all. Now, it is quite thick, this TV. I'd sort of say it's given me like 2015 vibes, like sort of like a flagship LED television from back then. That's the sort of vibes that I'm getting with its overall build quality and thickness. But to my surprise, it does have loads of connectivity. It's got like 3 HDMI ports from what I've just seen at the back, one of which is eARC, so it obviously supports Dolby Atmos and those more advanced surround sound features for a pretty good cinematic experience. And we'll talk more about the topic of pro features later on in the video, because this has some insane smart home stuff. And the good thing is, because this telly is cheap, it's not that heavy. I can just lift it around on my own. I don't need anyone to help me. Usually when we do television reviews, I need someone to move it around if it's like 55, 60 inches or something like this one. Just like one arm this thing around the studio. It's easy. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get this set up. First impressions. Light bleed on the panel's not the worst. It's actually got quite a nice coating on it. And brightness seems pretty good. Now, this isn't obviously the best starting image for like a backlit display, obviously like gray with like a gradient color, but there doesn't seem to be any massive patchiness and blooming going on. And the viewing angles don't seem to be too terrible. It's not super reflective either, like an OLED is. It seems to have a bit of an anti-glare coating on it. Obviously, there are some lights reflecting on it. It's worse on the camera than the human eye, but not awful. RCA. Badge isn't square though. It looks like the badge is coming off down here. Setup of the TV was very straightforward. You connect it to your Wi-Fi and then scan this QR code to create a Roku account, and then the TV setup from there was ready to go within 5 to 10 minutes. The Smart TV operating system also had some updates to complete for the latest apps, and then you were presented with the main home dashboard. So the TV does come with a smart remote, well, like a tele remote. I remember when smart TVs first came out, they were always like, smart TV remote. Like, what exactly is an unintelligent remote? It's just a controller, mate. Anyways, it's a nice controller. It feels good to the hand. It's got a good size to it. And also it's got all the smart hub buttons for booting up Netflix, booting up your Apple TV, Spotify, Amazon Prime. So that was pretty quick and easy to set up. It's now undergoing an update process. So we'll let it do that and then we'll hook up some of the video game consoles and see how it performs. Navigating around the home dashboard was fast and responsive. This TV doesn't have a crazy processor like something you would find inside of an LG OLED, which has upscaling, AI image enhancements, but it does the job and you get all of the smart TV apps you would want, including various different streaming services, games, and probably my favorite feature, the fact that the Smart TV operating system doesn't have any adverts plastered all over the home screen, which is something that I cannot say about the bigger brands like Samsung and LG. LG is one of the worst for having an excessive amount of sponsorships that clutter up the WebOS interface, making it actually very difficult to use and find your apps in amongst all of that mess. And it's a bit of a liberty because you do spend thousands of pounds and dollars on TVs from those companies. So one thing that I'm interested in trying out is the gaming performance of this TV. According to some reviews on Amazon, it supports 120 Hz. I'm assuming at 1440p because I do think this is a 4K 60 panel, but we're gonna find out by plugging in my PS5 and also my Xbox Series S to see if we can choose 120 inside of the display settings. Now this PS5 right here, I actually have had it custom spray painted with like actual car paint. We might be giving this console away super soon, so I'll leave a link down below in the video description for some further information on that so you can sign up and be notified for when we actually do that drop.
My overall gaming experience on this TV wasn't the greatest, but it also wasn't awful considering the price point of the display. Now, there was some noticeable ghosting happening in some of the fast-moving scenes in different titles, and what I mean by ghosting is almost like extra motion blur that's happening across the pixels on the display. Visually, the image was good quality, especially after I spent a little bit of time dialing in the various different settings, including the HDR, and also increasing some of that saturation. I felt like the colors were just a little bit washed out on the panel, so I increased some of the black levels and made them a little bit deeper, and then also increased some saturation just to get it to pop a little bit more. So once that was fine-tuned, image quality-wise, I think it looked very nice. Although when it came to the actual gameplay, that ghosting was a little bit noticeable, but that's because I do have the privilege of playing on some incredibly high-quality displays and testing and reviewing those here on the channel, like OLED, 240Hz, 480Hz screens, so I'm quite susceptible to noticing these things at a much lower price point. But for casual gaming, whether that be in your living room or even in a bedroom, especially sport titles such as FIFA or NBA for basketball players, I actually think it would be perfectly fine. Like a social TV, a few mates sat around the screen, you're playing some couch co-op in the likes of FC24, I think no problem at all there. When I hopped into games such as Halo and tried to be a little bit more competitive in multiplayer games, I did start to notice a high amount of input latency, and this was even with game mode enabled, which does reduce the latency time of the display. Now, it wasn't awful, the actual input response time. It was still playable, but I could definitely tell it was when I was trying to shoot enemies in a more competitive environment that just things weren't registering as fast as they could have, like the headshots or the body shots. Just my bullets sometimes didn't feel like they were landing on the enemy. So again, if you're hoping to be one of the top Call of Duty players in the world, this isn't going to be the display for you. But if you're playing casual with some mates, whether that be single player or just some casual multiplayer games, like titles like racing games were perfectly fine. Forza performed fine on the screen because you're not too heavily reliant on a perfect response time. It just needs to be good enough for racing games. There's a lot of assists as well if you're playing with controller that sort of mask any issues that you may occur and enter into. So ratings wise, for casual gaming, I would give it a solid 6 or 7 out of 10. For more competitive gamers who want to be pretty good in multiplayer titles, I would have to rate this TV around a 4 out of 10. It really depends how serious you take your games, but also something that I would bear in mind, because I've played on worse TVs than this when I was a kid. They were good TVs, but obviously the input latency would have been far worse than what we're experiencing here. And I think it's probably more of training your brain to adjust to that lag. So you obviously, factor that in when you are gaming. So if I do think you use this over a month or so, you'd probably get used to that delay and you would eventually get better in Halo. But coming from sub 1 millisecond gaming monitors that I use on a daily basis, I found it quite difficult to handle.
Right, you know what? This TV doesn't look too bad. So I've just jumped into the settings. It doesn't support 120 Hz like people were saying on Amazon. I have no idea what that was on about, unless it was like, how on Amazon sometimes it has multiple products available in different sizes and different product SKUs, but all the reviews are obviously linked to that same post. So I don't know whether it was a different type of TV someone purchased from that post that did, but it looks it supports HDR. So it's not crazy bright when you enable the HDR, it just is roughly the same. But what I noticed is when we switched the console out from 1080p to 4K, oh my word, the telly went from looking subpar, ooh, to wow, and the colors look much better once we enabled your 4K and obviously some of the advanced settings within the video modes on the Xbox Series X. Now, this telly doesn't support 10-bit color, it's 8-bit color, which is fine, it's not the end of the world. It's still pretty good. For $200, $300, this TV looks absolutely fantastic. So we can game at 4K 60 Hz in HDR, and also Dolby Atmos can be enabled with a soundbar if you want much more cinematic sound. We're going to test out and see what the speakers sound like in a minute, but first impressions, text looks superb and crisp, and colors look pretty good. Now on the controller, if we press this little star icon, this will open up the TV settings where we can dive into the picture settings and we can set different parameters. Now right now it's set to its brightest mode, so obviously that's going to impact some of the color reproduction because it's going to increase obviously just washing out the colors, get super bright, but you can switch it out to normal, bright, very bright, darker, and this will give more depth and contrast essentially to the image. I'm going to throw it on probably just bright for now rather than brighter. That seems good enough. And then as well, we can change the power mode. Right now it's in low power mode, but if you go ahead and put this into standard, vivid, and you change the colors, it will basically increase the power consumption of the telly, and that will inherently make it brighter and the colors will look better. So we've got sports, film, and also vivid. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it into standard. I think that looks pretty good. It's much brighter as well than when it was in sort of low power mode. And then you can customize the picture further with the different saturations, sharpness, and of course, enable game mode. Right now, game mode is turned off. So we'll go ahead and turn that on, which will now decrease the input lag, so it's much faster for playing our titles. So after jumping into some of the settings on this TV, it does actually support 10-bit color. Correction, I thought it only supported 8-bit color, but once we jumped into a game and then it sort of recognized the console properly, it suddenly enabled basically a 10-bit HDR. Now, it doesn't support Dolby Vision, which is a more advanced version of HDR. Now, what I noticed from the HDR sort of support, at first it looked very washed out compared to just running it in SDR. So I dived into the HDR specific settings on the TV, and then from there I increased things like the saturation, played about with the contrast, also adjusted sort of the color gamut levels. That made a significant difference to the image looking basically washed out to actually looking vibrant and how it should. I can't really tell too much of a huge brightness difference between SDR and HDR. Usually on a more expensive telly, when you enable HDR, it's like boom, like really wow, like the whole dynamic range completely transforms on the TV. But it is kind of there, but it's very subtle, especially if you play about with the settings. You might be able to tweak it a little bit further.
Thankfully, the experience, because the image quality is very good for this price range. For watching movies and streaming services, this TV looked brilliant. Now, I watched some of my very own YouTube videos in this footage here because I know what these videos should actually look like because I color graded and edited them on my PC. And first up, watching these via the YouTube app, the quality of them was a little bit different, like in terms of the colors weren't as full of information, I think the word would be. They just lack a bit of depth. So again, I hopped into some of the settings like earlier and changed some of the picture modes because again, you have particular picture modes for each HDMI input. Then obviously you have picture settings for your streaming apps that you can then tweak depending on your preferences. So I went ahead and messed about with the gamma levels, the black levels, the contrast, and the saturation. And I got these to look pretty close to what they should look like straight out of the camera that I filmed them with. I would say in terms of overall image quality compared to what I know these should look like on a very high quality display, it was an easy 6 out of 10. Like considering the price point, I think that's absolutely excellent. You know, more like an 8 out of 10 when you factor in that this telly was about $200. So if you are using this for some casual daytime television consumption, I think it would be brilliant for just watching mainstream TV on here during the day. The panel was more than bright enough so it could withstand any sort of severe daytime light coming through your windows like sunshine sort of reflecting on the screen. But more importantly, it worked fine for watching movies late at night in a dark room. I think the quality of the image was very good, especially if you have this in your bedroom. It would be amazing watching TVs and movies in bed. One thing that was rather lackluster was the audio quality of the internal speakers.
Derek Ray here on the commentary position and sitting alongside me to provide expert analysis.
My main desktop machine. So when I saw these laptops at CES, both the G14 and G16.
Now, these internal speakers weren't terrible. They were very clear in terms of the clarity of the voice reproduction, but they definitely lacked a degree of depth in terms of the bass reproduction. So I personally found that they were quite thin sounding. My voice sounded rather thin compared to what it does when I use my headphones or have a soundbar or even use the internal speakers on my LG OLEDs. Those speakers are absolutely exceptional for internal speakers. There was about a good 12 months I used the internal speakers on those tellies before I even bought a soundbar. But thankfully, this TV does support Dolby Atmos, which is an advanced version of surround sound technology. So you can plug in some pretty nice soundbars into the back of this. It's got a HDMI eARC as well. So you can get some good quality sound systems for this display. And some of them aren't too expensive. I personally have a Panasonic one in my bedroom that I purchased around Christmas time for a video. And it was only a couple $100, I think around £300. But there's much cheaper ones, even from brands like Sonos that you can pick up in the £200 mark. And I use some of these Sonos soundbars all over our studios because they're so small and compact, and also have an app so you can stream your music from Apple Music and Spotify very easily from your mobile phone. So that's a very easy solution that you can definitely get for around £100 to £200, and it would massively increase the cinematic experience. But one thing you do have to bear in mind, if you are are going to be using this television for gaming, like I said, in your bedroom or a games room or in the living room, 99% of gamers now wear a headset. You don't even use a soundbar or speakers other than for that one occasion where you're playing like a single player game without any of your mates. But what you usually wear is a fantastic gaming headset that has 3D audio or some form of surround sound, so you can both hear the gameplay and also obviously converse and chat with your friends within the party chat systems on your PS5 or your Xbox Series X. So speakers are definitely becoming less and less important inside of some televisions because of this factor. And again, you can easily pick up some really high quality headphones for $80 to $150. We reviewed loads of them here on the channel, including the new PlayStation Pulse Elite headset for the PS5. This is an incredible headset for the price point, and I found myself using this obviously over the internal speakers a majority of the time. In terms of the applications available for the streaming apps, they have literally everything on this TV. You've got, especially in the UK, you got BBC, ITV, like Channel 4, Channel 5, but also you have all of the major streaming platforms, including Disney Plus, Amazon, Netflix, obviously Roku services. And if you also consider the quality of the image, if you are using this for daytime TV, whether that be Freeview or cable TV in America, the quality of cable TV in America isn't as good as cable TV in the UK. UK we have 4K Ultra HD with a Skybox, so you can leverage some of the HDR and more advanced features this TV does offer. But if you're an American viewer and you're picking up a Roku TV for the USA, your quality of cable is much lower. It's just sort of scraping HD from my understanding and from being out there watching it in various hotel rooms. So this display would be perfectly fine for consuming casual TV like news and also TV shows during the days and evenings.
Now overall, I would say that this budget TV is definitely worth it considering its price point of around $200 to $300. For a 4K TV of this caliber, it's mightily impressive. I remember only a few years ago when I had a 4K telly that I managed to pick up for around like £500-600 for my bedroom, that it was like off scale amazing. This was the greatest TV ever. And if I compare the feature set on this Roku TV compared to that one back in sort of like 2015, I think it was, when I picked that up, mightily better of a TV. Like all of the streaming apps, the way that you can utilize those streaming apps, and of course the quality of the 4K panel, and also the latency of this panel is definitely better than the one I used to game on my Xbox One and some of those consoles I had when I was a kid. So taking all of that into consideration, I actually think it's very good for anybody who's looking to build out a budget gaming setup, or even just have an additional setup somewhere else in the house, whether that be in a game room or a bedroom. This TV does also have some advanced features that really did surprise me, including support for both ALM and also VRR. So these are both next generation features for both the PS5 and also Xbox Series X. Auto low latency mode does help reduce that latency much more, in terms of, so it's much faster feeling when you're playing your games. I know I stated in this video it wasn't the greatest input lag from what I was feeling overall, but it was definitely assisted by features like this to make it bearable and very usable for like single player games and some casual multiplayer with some friends. And of course, variable refresh rate is a next generation feature more for 120 Hz gaming, but it does help sort of smooth out frame rates in different titles and just make games run just a little bit smoother when in performance mode. I will leave links down below in the video description to the exact TV that we reviewed inside of today's video. Also bear in mind, panels like this will be much cheaper in sort of like Black Fridays, Amazon Prime Days, so although I purchased it for around $200-300, I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't get it for significantly less during one of these flash sales. But if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this, and leave a comment down below what size TV do you currently own and is the perfect size for your gaming setup. But as always, I've been Rowlands. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.